Hi, I'm Yvonne Webb of Action Coach Business Coaching.
And I'm Stuart Clark, the Managing Director of Russell & Russell, and we're the co-hosts and sponsors of the Glasgow Business Stories podcast. If you're enjoying Glasgow Business Stories, then why not subscribe to the channel? There's new videos dropping every fortnight with great business stories from great business owners, so we don't want you to miss out.
Heather, welcome to the Glasgow Business Stories podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So we're really excited to have you here, and I'd be really interested to hear a bit more about the backstory and how you got to where you are now. We can start wherever you want, but give us a bit of background.
Sure. Okay. So probably the best thing to start with is the business and how the business itself started. So I'm the Managing Director of Little's Chauffeur Drive. We are an almost 60-year-old family business based here in Glasgow. We also have garages in Edinburgh and Aberdeen. And the business was started with my dad and my uncle in 1966. And they were two young men living in an area called Penlee. They didn't really know what they wanted to do with their lives, but they were friends with another boy called George, and his surname was Little. And George Little's family were about to emigrate to Australia. And George Little Senior, that's three Georges already, but yes, that's right. George Little Senior was about to take his family and emigrate to Australia. But George Little had started this business of taxis that you could advance book. And back in the day, you couldn't actually advance book a taxi. What you had to do is go out in the street and try and hail one down. So George had come up with this very innovative idea of people being able to come to him and actually pre-book a taxi. So Little's advanced booking service, as it was known then, existed. And my dad and my Uncle Mike somehow persuaded my grandparents to lend them some money to buy the business. So they bought 3 taxis from this man, George Little, in 1966. And it's grown from there.
And what age were they at that time?
My dad would have been 22. I mean, really young, really young. It really, looking back, it was incredible, the entrepreneurial nature of my dad. And I don't think he knew what that even meant in those days, but they really had this drive to do something. And they always looked at it from the client point of view from the very, very beginning. And even now we take that into our car buying decisions to this day. We look at a car in terms of how much room there is in the back. It's not about who's driving the car, it's how much room there is in the back, how big is the boot. And my dad and my Uncle Mike always looked at it that way. It was all about the customer and all about the client. So that's the very beginning of the business. It was very much taxis initially. Then wedding cars. Wedding cars were a huge part of the 70s and 80s. And even to this day, we still meet people and I tell them what I do and they say, oh, you did my wedding cars. Happens all the time. So that was a big part of the business in the 70s and 80s. And then it's changed since then over many years. I joined the business in 1991 at the age of 21. And I've been managing director since 2005.
Was it always a plan to join the family business?
No, not at all. When I was growing up, my sister wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was never really seen necessarily as being a family business at that point. It was just my dad's business. And in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, actually when I came out of university, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. But there was a part of my postgrad was around marketing. And my dad asked if I could help him with a marketing project that was just meant to last 6 months. And at the time, I was doing other things. I was working in a pub in Glasgow, and I had 2 other catering-related jobs, as you do in your early 20s. And I went to work for my dad at the age of 21, and we had spotted the potential market for financial services. Certainly financial services in Edinburgh was growing significantly. And there was lots of people from London who were wanting to come to Edinburgh to go around all of the financial services offices, Scottish Widows, those sort of big fund managers. And there was an opportunity for us to expand in London. So my marketing project was to contact all the people in investor relations in London. And that at that point was in a book, a big book that I had to just go through. There was no internet, there was no email. So my first 6 months were doing this enormous marketing project and contacting all these people to try and grow our London business. And after 6 months, I decided to stay. But for the first 5 years, I was still working in a pub in Glasgow. So, I would work from 8 till 2 for my dad. I'd go home and have a quick disco nap. And then I'd go into the pub. I worked in the Drum and Monkey in St. Vincent Street. And I'd go in there at 6 and work till midnight or 1 in the morning. And then I'd do the same thing again. I did that for years.
And at what point did you go, actually, I'm going to be full-time in the business and I'm going to
in 1997, out of the blue, and this is classic family business stuff, where I think family businesses can be extremely well thought out around the succession, and they can also be very random. And this was a bit of random stuff where my dad, after work one night, 8 o'clock at night, just said, your mum and I have been thinking, would you like to be a partner? And that was it. And, so I became a partner in 1997. And then we started discussing succession in the early 2000s. My dad was probably not much older than I am now. And he realised that there needed to be some sort of transition between him to me. And we went through a sort of 3-year programme through... It was a course we did at Glasgow Caledonian, and it was around family businesses and succession, because it's not something that the first generation can just walk away from. There needs to be this whole plan. And so in 2003, that was when we completed that. And then he didn't walk away, but he certainly retired from day-to-day running of the business in 2005.
And how did he find that? Even with all the planning, was it quite easy for him to step back?
No, I don't think it was. And I think for a long time he would still come in. I mean, he still wanted to know. And to this day, he wants to know what's happening. He's interested. And it's lovely for me to tell him and just, so he'll just say, how's business? And then we'll have a chat. And so much has changed, and so many of our clients have changed that it's a very, very different business. But the sort of real basic concept at the centre of it, which is all about customer service, is still very much there. So he's still interested. But I think in the early years it was a wee bit tricky, because he still knew everybody, he knew all the clients, he knew all the employees. And I think there comes a point, and I think this is quite common with family business owners, is when you get to the point that you go into your business and you don't really know most of the staff. At that point, I think it becomes a bit more difficult to feel as connected with it.
And what about you? Did you ever have a wobble and think, am I doing the right thing? Because at 21, it's quite early to go into the family business and I guess not have a whole load of life experience. Ever any thoughts of doing something different?
Well, I think for me, I really liked it. I didn't know, as I said, when I was 21, that I would be doing it for a long time. It was just something that I was doing that I enjoyed. I think what surprised me was how much that I liked it. And it was really hard work, but I've always worked really hard. And I think to have kept going other jobs while I was doing it, it just was something else that I was enjoying. And it was a gradual thing. Yeah, it was a gradual thing for me. And it wasn't that I then thought, right, I want to go and do something else.
And if you were to think back, what is it that you enjoy about it or enjoyed about it? What was it that pulled you towards it?
It can be really exciting. I mean, if we're really busy, if there's a lot going on, if there's a big event in the city that we're involved in, and there are multiple cars out, chauffeurs out, it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle sometimes. So we have over 40 cars in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen. We have a number of full-time chauffeurs. We have a number of supply chauffeurs who are used as and when. These are people who generally they've done a profession for many years, they're retired and they want to do something else. They're not ready to stop working. So they will work when we are busy, but they don't necessarily need to work full time. So you have all of them. And then sometimes with big events, we bring in event chauffeurs who are one-off people. So you have all this resource, I suppose, to put it, that you've got to fit into all the gaps. And if you've got a lot on, like over 100 hires a day is a really busy day for us. And it's constantly changing and constantly evolving. And the reason for that is people who use chauffeur-driven cars will change their plans all the time. They'll miss a flight, they'll just get another flight, they'll decide at a whim that they're just coming to Scotland or whatever. So there's just this constant movement. It's the classic thing of no 2 days are ever the same. And I think over the years, that buzz of the office that I'd really, really enjoyed was something that kept me interested. And I then think, looking at what's next, what else can we do? What other markets can we tap into? How can we stay ahead of what's happening in the market? How can we make sure we're evolving all the time as well? who else can we bring into the business who knows more about it than we do? All of that. I just loved all that. It's never been static. It's never been something that you just go in and do the same thing day after day. I don't think I could do that.
And what kind of markets are you in then? Because I think my first perception is, as you said, just those individuals that maybe get an airport transfer or something like that. But when we were talking earlier, you're saying it's actually much more widespread than that. I
think for us, we're a very unusual market, or market's not the right word. We're an unusual business. If I've ever said to people over the years, I used to tell them what I did, the perception is that chauffeur-driven cars are used by pop stars or, very, very wealthy people. And while that may be the case, there's not that many of them. So chauffeur-driven cars are used by corporate markets, so business people who are looking to get to and from meetings in an efficient way. And the chauffeur can help them by making sure that they are there on time, they've got everything they need, he can go and get them lunch while they're having the meeting, all these other things. He's almost a concierge on the road. So that's the corporate side of things. The leisure traveller, so these are holiday makers, I suppose, not generally UK based, generally overseas. They were coming in from US and Canada. That's our biggest market. So you have a US family who are coming to Scotland who are trying to trace their roots. There's a huge thing about Americans that they all, not all think they're Scottish, but a lot of them do. A lot of them think they have a Scottish ancestor. So they come to try and trace their roots, and we'll help with all of that. So they might contact us 6 months out and say we're interested in going to see Forbes Castle, for instance, because we think we're distantly related to the Forbes. So you get involved in making up this massive itinerary for them, which takes them all over Scotland, and they'll stay in 5-star hotels. And our chauffeur will be with them for that whole period, and he will be giving them commentary and information along the way. The touring chauffeurs are absolutely brilliant, and they love it. So they're really well versed in Scottish history, but they also know lots of unusual places to take people. And I think that's a huge part of our business. We also work with tour operators and travel agents. Now, the tour operators will be selling our chauffeur-driven cars as part of a package. The travel agents will be dealing with directly, and they'll have the client directly into them. There's always a chain of people that are behind us. But we do have direct clients as well. So we have private individuals that we deal with. A big growth area for us in the last couple of years also has been clinical trials. So we organise clinical trials transport worldwide. So as well as having a fleet of cars in Scotland that are based across Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen, we also have an international footprint across the whole world, really. We're in 125 countries. And how we do that is through a network of suppliers that we have worked with for many, many years. So we have people who use it who actually might never have been in one of our cars in Scotland, and we will organise cars for them all over the world. So we get involved in that side of things. If there is a big event in Scotland, we will do that. We were heavily involved in the Commonwealth Games in 2014. We did an enormous amount for COP26. We had on the Leaders Weekend over 300 cars out for COP. So anything large that's happening in Scotland or the UK, we are involved in, because as well as having these chauffeurs in these cars, we're in logistics and we're in event management. That's what we do, is organise massive groups of people who are moving around. That's the basis of what we do, because as well as having our own cars, we can organise coaches, we can organise helicopters, boats, all sorts of things. So anything to do with transport, we get involved in.
I guess that logistics side of things has changed quite a lot since your dad started the firm.
Well, very much so. Very much so.
Is it all computer driven now, or how do you invest in that side of things? Is it? So
that's a really good question, because that's the thing that we're looking at the moment. But to go back to the how it started and where we are, how it started was my dad and my uncle were out driving, so they weren't actually in any sort of office. They were just in a garage, and they couldn't get any more work because they couldn't answer the phone because they were out driving. And if they weren't out driving, then that wasn't good. But they basically realised they needed someone to answer the phone. So our first employee joined the business when she was, I think Vi was 15, and she was answering the phones. Excuse me. And she made a big difference, because if we could get more business by her answering the phones, that meant that Dad and Mike were out on the road more, and that's where the revenue would come from. So answering the phones was a big thing. I remember when I joined the business, we didn't have a computer. It was 1991, so that's normal. But I remember when we got our first computer, and one of the employees that still works with us, Sharon, she and I were talking the other day actually, because we're doing a big piece of work at the moment around our 60th anniversary, and we were talking about when we got our first computer, but we only had one, and we had to share it, and we were all terrified of it. But this was what would allow us then to actually enter in the bookings. So back then, the bookings we would take over the phone and we would write them in a massive handwritten diary. And then in the late afternoon, we would then typewrite all of these jobs to give to the chauffeurs for the next day. So it was a big thing when we were able to then put them into a computer. And the computer also allowed us to do route planning. There was something way before Google Maps called autoroute. So you would put in your start point, your finish point, where you were going, and we get an accurate mileage. So we used that for a number of years. Then in, I think, the late 90s, my dad realised that actually we needed our own software to run the business. So he wrote this software, very, very basic software. And we're now on the 4th generation of that. So we've always had our own bespoke reservation system. However, we are just about to change that because the world has changed so much and technology has changed so much, particularly in the last 5 years, that whatever we develop ourselves, we can't keep up with what's going on externally. So we've realised that actually we need to now buy in, going forward, we need to buy in the software that's going to run the business, because there's so many things that you can now do that we can't really do on our own. So there's a big mind shift change about to happen. We're doing a lot of work on that in the current year with the hope of getting that in place by the start of next year.
Sounds like you guys have always been innovative though.
Always.
Like, you know, the fact that it was pre-booking taxis wasn't a thing, and then you built your own software. How many businesses did that? And having a computer, you know, as you said, wasn't necessarily the norm.
No, it wasn't. Well. And I think, you know, that's where the entrepreneurial side comes in. My dad was very entrepreneurial and I'm very entrepreneurial. And I think that's hugely important when you have a business. You can't sit still, because if you sit still, you get left behind. So yes, there's always been that side of it. It's really important to keep thinking, right, what else can we do? What's next?
And in terms of the mix of customers you've got, I'm interested in the clinical trials. Where did that come from and how did that evolve?
So the clinical trials it came originally as part of a travel agency, effectively a business travel company, who approached us and asked if we could do work for them for one of their big clients. And I think it was originally just a few people who were doing it, and it just grew and grew. But clinical trials transport, what that is people who are being taken to and from their home, either directly to a hospital or to an airport to then fly somewhere else to go to a hospital because they're undergoing clinical trials for some sort of normally malignant disease. And when people are doing a clinical trial, from the pharmaceutical point of view, they want to keep the people on the trial, because if they stay on the trial, they'll get the sort of results that they need that ultimately, ideally means that this drug can be brought to market. That's what it's all about, obviously. And retaining people on a clinical trial is really important, because the data is really only relevant if they're retained on the entire trial. So the pharmaceutical companies will pay for the people to be taken to and from the hospital to make sure that they can get there. Sometimes these people are not very well, but they need a bit of additional assistance. So the clinical trials transport is basically making their lives easier and also helping the pharmaceuticals to keep them on the trial. And that is worldwide. And what we saw during COVID, when things were particularly bad, and I'm sure we'll touch on that, but during COVID, there really wasn't anything else happening. There was nothing happening in Scotland at all. But clinical trials transport kept going. And in strange places, we did clinical trials transport in Ukraine during COVID. This was before the Ukraine war. And it's not quite day in, day out, but people on a trial will maybe go for some sort of treatment once a week or once a fortnight. So there's this regularity in it. And it's all over Europe, when we've just started doing it in the US as well. So it's a growing market for us, and it's a good one because it's also year round. We're very seasonal as a business. We're very busy in the summer, less busy in the winter. And if we can even that out and have more business during the winter, that just makes things much easier for us from an overheads point of view.
And do you do a lot of marketing internationally? How do you get your clients?
So our clients, we don't do the marketing internationally because most of the clients who use us internationally are based in the UK. So they're either based in Scotland or based in London, and they're the ones that are travelling internationally. So the core marketing that we do is here in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on COVID there, so let's go there. So you rely on ferrying people about, the world stops, nobody's travelling. At what point do you think,
About 10 days out. So there was a lot, obviously, of noise at the beginning of 2020, all of which I think most of us thought, it won't happen. It's just the press overplaying it. What does that mean? That's never happened before. I think everyone was in exactly the same situation. And I am a member of a worldwide organisation called Vistage. And Vistage is peer-to-peer learning with other CEOs. And we had a Vistage meeting about 10 days in advance of the lockdown. And it was a real wake up, us all realising, right, this is really going to happen. What are we going to do? And that was really a huge thing for me to then come back into the business. And I realised that we needed to do something and do something quite quickly. I didn't think that we were going to be locked down. I didn't think that there was going to be a complete stop and a halt to all travel. But at that point, I saw what was going to happen in terms of we were going to have a massive reduction. We'd also had, I think, £145,000 worth of cancellations in a day, something nuts, something horrible. And so 10 days out, I had to bring everybody together and say, this is possibly going to get really difficult. I think what we need to do is reduce everybody's hours. And I managed to get everyone to agree to reduce to 60% of pay for 60% of pay for 60% of hours. But then very quickly, if you remember, it evolved so that it just got worse and worse and worse every day. And lockdown itself, at that point, there's still an element of, this can't be real. This is not actually going to happen. This is not going to affect us. But of course it did. So early days stuff, everybody's home. Furlough absolutely saved us. Myself and all hospitality businesses will tell you that furlough really saved us because we were not allowed to do anything. And all of our employees obviously went home and there was really not a great deal for us to do work-wise, but there was still an enormous amount to do to organise things because the early days of furlough, nobody knew what it meant from an HR point of view. You're just constantly trying to think of how do we look after our team? What do we do here? So it was very, very busy for myself. And at that point, the two other people who helped me run the business, my co-director, Kenneth, and our head of operations, Robert. So the three of us were the only ones that still kept working and everyone else basically was at home. And it continued like that for 18 months. We didn't really turn a wheel for 18 months. There was nothing apart from the clinical trials. So we split the day into, we're on call 24 hours a day. You can call us any time, day or night, and we'll answer the phone within 15 seconds. And that continued. So we needed to have cover the entire time. So we split the day into three. So one of us would work in the morning into the early afternoon. One of us would work the afternoon into the evening, and one of us would be on call overnight. And we did that for 18 months. And yeah, it was really, really hard because there was nothing. We didn't know when it was going to end. And we had no revenue. And yeah, it was pretty awful thinking back. But I think what really saved us was COP. So COP26 was due to happen in the winter of 2020. And I think the first few weeks of the pandemic, there was this thinking that it wouldn't last that long. It's the classic, it'll be over by Christmas chat, which clearly it wasn't. And I think there was a moment when COP26 was cancelled that we thought, this is really, really serious. And there was points where we thought we wouldn't survive it at all. But COP26 then did go ahead in December 2021. So this is a year and a half, if not more, after the pandemic started. And I realised in probably the July of 21, this is probably going to happen. I better start scaling up again because we had no staff. I'd had to make a number of people redundant. That's the worst thing I've ever had to do. And that then left us really, really short because when you're in a situation where you're about to, as it turned out, be very involved with the biggest event the UK has ever seen. And that's something a lot of people don't realise. COP26 in Glasgow was the biggest event that's ever been put on in the UK. When you're going to be in the heart of that, you need as many people as you can get. You need as many cars as you can get. So we started to go from almost nothing to scaling hugely up to be able to cope with what we actually had to cope with. But that allowed us to survive because we recovered in one fell swoop financially with that event. On the Leaders Weekend, we had over 300 cars out. The period leading up to the Leaders Weekend for 3 or 4 weeks, we had scaled up to the point that we'd over 100 extra chauffeurs. We took over 100 extra cars. We had a whole team that were running these extra chauffeurs because it was also still during COVID. COVID protocol still existed. So we had to make sure that all of these chauffeurs were doing their lateral flow tests, had the wipes in the car, had masks, all these things. They all had to check in once a day with 6 different questions. We outsourced that, actually. We had probably what is the biggest WhatsApp group in the world at that point of all these chauffeurs. So we had 2 people running that group to make sure that we had peace of mind and we were following all the protocols we needed to follow. I also brought in some project managers from one of the destination management companies that we work with who were still not working. They still didn't have any business. So I brought in 3 of their project managers to help us on a temporary basis. Because what I had to do was scale up and then scale back down again. I couldn't take everybody on full time because we didn't know what was on the other side. And then Omicron came along, so we were flat again for 3 months. So COP was this enormous thing in the middle of nothing, in the middle of a landscape when nothing happened at all. And then we had COP, so thank goodness for that.
And how long did it take you to rebuild the business to what it was before and take it beyond?
Well, I think on the other side of the spring of 2022, there was this massive rebound where everybody suddenly was allowed out again and everybody had money in the bank. So myself and all hospitality businesses will tell you that the summer of 2022 was both a huge blessing and a curse because everybody was hammered with business. It was so busy. We didn't have enough staff. Capacity was beyond what we could cope with. But we were also in a post-COVID, we just need to take everything we can get mind frame. So summer 22 was really, really difficult for different reasons. We were so busy and we came out the other side of that and thought, right, we need to restructure here. You know, we can't cope with this level. So we looked at things really seriously in the summer of 22 and completely restructured the business, put in a proper senior leadership team. I moved up a level so that I had more oversight in the business rather than managing day to day and being very operational. And that allowed us to then change things quite a lot. And our business has grown hugely since then. So our best year pre-COVID, we're now at almost double that. So, you know, in the last 5 years, the business has changed a lot and we're still looking at where we can go and where we can grow.
Has that changed your planning going forward? I was going to ask the COVID, you know, the fact that it just kind of crept up, has it made you more cautious about growing, going, actually, what if something else happens? Or have you gone, actually, because you've got this new structure in place, you're going to actually, we can drive forward and really focus on growing the business?
I don't think anyone could have foreseen COVID. No. And I think we've weathered storms in the past, but it's always been market specific. So in the 2008-9 financial crash, the corporate market went down, but the leisure market recovered or was still there. And because we work across so many markets, we've always managed to keep going because one falls down, one is busy. I think the unique nature of the pandemic was that everything stopped. And unless there's another pandemic, I don't think that necessarily will happen again. So our growth strategy is to make sure we keep all those different income streams going because that protects us, and making sure that we are as evenly spread across all those income streams as we can be and not too heavily reliant on one thing. And I think that will stand us in good stead. And looking to see where else we can grow and what else we can do. Because during COVID, like everyone else, I thought, right, what else can I do? That whole pivoting thing, which I didn't like the word at the time. I still don't like it. And I think some people were able to pivot and able to survive because of that. We were not really able to do that, but I did buy another company during COVID, which was completely different from what we do. It was a company that sold gift vouchers online for 5-star hotels. And sort of in our market, because we work with 5-star hotels, but pretty tenuous. But it meant that my team still had something to do. They actually were putting vouchers in envelopes. They were still busy. So the ideal thing would be to have something else we do that's related to Chauffeur Drive, but gives us business in the winter. Because as I mentioned earlier, we're very seasonal, and trying to even that out a bit more is very much one of the focuses that we have across the whole senior leadership team at the moment. We talk about the whole winter business problem endlessly because summer is almost too busy for us, and winter just gets really quiet. So it's trying to even those two things out. That's where our growth will come from. Is evening that out.
I guess a lot of people will think it's not for them. That, back to the whole rich and famous, and we were talking earlier about going to another country and actually booking your services for when you land. People probably don't associate that as a normal thing to do.
No, they don't. And people use it as a special occasion piece. Going on holiday, perhaps you'll organise a car when you get there. You might do that via your travel agent anyway. And I think for most people, it's not an everyday thing. But I think for us, making sure that we're plugging into all the markets that would consider using it. And I think for companies who are looking for peace of mind when their CEO or C-suite are travelling, it's really important. For people who are wanting a really special holiday and they use our touring chauffeurs for that, our US clients who use our touring chauffeurs, then that's great. And I think for events, for the speakers who are coming into conferences, for all the big things that happen in Scotland, because we're involved in them all, it very much is something that people will use. But you're right, for most people, it's not an everyday thing. And we're very niche. We know that. It's a very unusual thing to do.
This is new news for me, this whole touring chauffeurs thing. I didn't know it was... So they actually follow the person or stay with the person the whole holiday?
They stay with the person the whole holiday. So we saw a massive growth in that post-COVID, and we actually now have our own touring department. We've always done it, and we used to do it. We're doing a lot of work, as I think I mentioned, around our 60th anniversary. And we started looking after US clients predominantly who were coming into Scotland many, many, many years ago. And I think my mum used to do it. But it would involve letter writing. So she would get a letter from a US travel agent saying, I've got clients coming to Scotland next summer and they're looking to travel around Scotland. And my mum would send a letter back. So this would go on for ages. And then the people would arrive and they would be matched with a chauffeur who would perhaps know a little bit more about what they were interested in. Because people come sometimes with very specific things that they want to know about. And our sightseeing chauffeurs or touring chauffeurs, what we find in them when we're recruiting for people, when recruiting for chauffeurs, and I suppose I can talk about that a little bit as well. A really good chauffeur is someone who, number one, is a good driver. So they need to be a really excellent, safe, smooth driver. They know their way about, so they know Scotland ideally really well, certainly Glasgow and Edinburgh. But the really good chauffeurs who love it and who are really well loved by the clients are the guys who have this breadth of knowledge. So they know a lot about a lot of different things. And whether that's history or geography or just the hidden gems that there are in Scotland that they can take their clients to, those are the ones that do the touring. And they get a lot of preparation time in advance of a tour because we ask lots of questions, either of the travel agent or the direct client about, what do you want from this tour? What are you trying to achieve from the tour? If you're tracing your ancestry, what information have you already got? What castles are you interested in seeing? Do you play golf? All the things that people want to do. And we then help to devise an itinerary, and the chauffeur then gets that itinerary. And he then, as you said, he then stays with them. So the clients will be staying generally in a 5-star hotel, and the chauffeur might be with them for 3 or 5 or 7 days or even longer. And they do the touring during the day. They get to their hotel. He'll stay somewhere local in a bed and breakfast or somewhere else. And then the next morning he comes and picks them up and off they go again. And they get to the point that they get to know the chauffeur quite well. The chauffeur becomes an integral part of their holiday and they form quite a nice relationship. And people come back year after year and request the same chauffeur. And our chauffeurs get invited to go and stay with these people all over the world. They get these amazing letters or emails or whatever from their clients year after year. And it's a really lovely thing for people to do. They really get so much more out of it. They really get so much more of an authentic Scottish experience when they're being driven around by an authentic Scottish man.
How do you hire for that? Because as you say, it's not just the good driving skills, it's actually that personality, and they're the face of the company as well. They're the front line. So how do you make sure you've got someone that's out there representing you and making sure that you're the best that you can be, or the company's the best it can be?
So our interview process for chauffeurs goes through the very basic one, which is are they a good chauffeur or are they a good driver? Sorry. So they have a driving test. It's the first thing they do, and we have one of our longest serving members of staff is a chauffeur in Edinburgh called Chris, and Chris is our chauffeur manager and recruitment manager. And Chris will meet with them first of all. Once we've got a CV and decided there is a match in some level, and Chris will get them to take him out for a drive, and he'll take them in a route that we always go that might have a couple of slightly trickier bits they've got to navigate. You know, crossing a busy road or up a side street where there's lots of parked cars, and just watching whether or not they're really taking their time and is it a smooth journey and all of those things. Once we've established that, a lot of it is just getting to know them. Are they a good fit? We really hire on values. We spent a long time post-COVID looking at our values and setting the values of our company. And we ask people values-based questions. But for the chauffeurs as well, it's what did they do in their working life? Because as I think I said earlier, a lot of them might have had a career before they joined us. And what was that career? If they were someone that was driving all over Scotland, you know, doing sales or something, that's great because they'll know the way about. If they were a history teacher, they're probably going to know a lot about Scottish history. If they have a hobby that involves them fishing, climbing Munros, cycling, doing something that got them out and about, those are all good indicators that someone has that well-rounded knowledge of Scotland. But they've got to be nice people, you know, you've got to hire nice people that you know that you can put your clients with, because as you said, they're the face of the business. And we do so much in the background in terms of our marketing. But ultimately, if a client arrives at the airport and they're met with someone smiling at them, dressed in a chauffeur's uniform. Our chauffeurs are very traditionally dressed. They still wear a hat. So you get off the plane and you come out and you see this man dressed fully in a chauffeur's uniform, and he's holding up an iPad with her name on it and he's smiling. It gets everything off to the right start. That's what you want. That's absolutely key.
And what are the values of the business and how important was it? Do you know, I guess you obviously went for a few 30, 40 years without them, but has it been a big transformation since then? How's it helped you in the business actually getting those? Because a lot of businesses don't have values. I think it's kind of fluffy, I think what
we realised was that those values were inherent and they were there anyway. So all we've done is actually put language around them. One of the key ones is about going the extra mile. And I think for our chauffeurs particularly, that's really important, is they always do a wee bit extra. They always give their clients a wee bit more. And we get what we call wow moments. We measure all these things now. You know, the world's changed a lot, but we actually do measure our wow moments at our senior leadership team on a Monday. How many wow moments to get from last year or last week. And what that is when people have taken the time to either write directly to a chauffeur, to write to us about something extra that they did for them. And that's one of them. That's going the extra mile. Another one is around tenacity and resilience. And that comes from COVID and how we got through COVID. But the whole process of setting these values was around looking at our employees and what sort of values are they displaying anyway? You know, what do they do? What makes them brilliant at their job? They're tenacious, they're resilient, they go the extra mile. All the other things that are really important, and what's in the DNA of the company. And it's not just the chauffeurs; it's in our office team. They do all these things as well. And we have now got to the stage that we hire on values, and we ask, as I mentioned, questions within the interview process on that. So it might be something along, you know, tell me a time where you have been collaborative and innovative. You know, that's one of them. So it's trying to get people to display to us those values that are inherent in their own personality, because those are the behaviours that they will then display without us teaching them, because you can't teach people these things. So you want to hire people who have that inherently in their own personality, and then they go out and they display that and they deliver the service we want them to deliver.
And just out of interest, why are the cars Burgundy?
So the cars are Burgundy because back in the day they were black. All cars were black in the early sort of 60s and 70s. And my dad bought one Burgundy car. The story goes it was from the Queen Mother. Although my mum last night, we're having all this conversation about the 60th anniversary. And my mum last night said she thought it was for Princess Alexandra. So I don't know whose car it was, but anyway, it was some sort of royal car. So it was this really dark burgundy. And my dad managed to buy this car, and he brought it up from London. And that was when we did a lot of weddings. And that car went out on a wedding. And apparently the phone rang off the hook on the Monday to say, I want that car, because everyone else's cars are black and they had a burgundy car. So my dad decided that what he would do is he would repaint the rest of the fleet burgundy. And since then, they've always been burgundy. And we're still unique in that, because it is a really rich, deep colour. It's a tone that is not black. So black is a very formal colour. And if you travel internationally, most chauffeur-driven cars are black. Ours are dark enough that they have that feel about them, but they're just slightly different. So we've always had, since that day, and whenever that was, the early 70s, I think we've always had burgundy cars.
Nice. And are we going to be able to tease any stories out about any of the rich and famous, or anyone you've chauffeured about?
Well, again, my mum was talking about this last night, and this was quite funny because I wouldn't give you any recent stories, because we just don't talk about our clients like that. But she was talking last night about the Osmonds. Now, this is a very old story, but this was from the 70s, I think, the 70s. And apparently back in the day, when the Osmonds were massive, and they were this boy band, everybody loved the Osmonds. And apparently Radio Clyde had some sort of competition where you could win the pillow that Donny Osmond had slept on. So this was the big thing. And my mum was telling me last night that the whole thing was completely made up, because actually on the night that the Osmonds were playing at the Apollo in Glasgow, which doesn't exist anymore, some people may remember, most people won't, you do. So the Osmonds were playing at the Apollo, and they were so famous that they had to be smuggled out the back in a van with us. We were looking after them. And so they didn't actually stay in Glasgow that night. We smuggled them out in the van, and we managed to get them out and straight to the airport. So they didn't stay in Glasgow. So the whole pillow thing didn't make any sense. But the point of the story is, in order to make the van a bit more comfortable, a whole lot of cushions and pillows and stuff from our house were put in the back of the van. So we actually ended up with all of these pillows and cushions that the Osmonds had all sat on. So
Did you sell them off?
Well, I was probably about 5, so no. I don't think my entrepreneurial spirit had quite kicked in then. But, there's things like that. We did a lot. We were really heavily involved with record companies in the 70s. So, yeah, my dad was telling me a story about Mick Jagger last night and Cliff Richard, and, really exciting stuff from a long time ago, because that was just a growing market. Record companies was a growing market, but it's changed. Every single decade has got a primary market that we work in, and that's not necessarily one of the big ones that we do at the moment.
Have you got any special celebrations planned for the 60th?
So the big thing we're doing at the moment is filming a documentary next week. We have 3 days of filming. We're going to be speaking to, as well as myself and my mum and dad. My son's going to be part of it. He's nearly 16. He sees his future in the business. Whether that happens or not, it's up to him. There's no pressure from me. But we're also going to be speaking to Vi, who I mentioned earlier, who's our first ever employee. We have lots of the people who are in the business at the moment. Jim, who's our mechanic, who's worked for us for well in excess of 40 years. He'll be telling a story. It's all stories led. It's very much memories, stories, and we've also digitised a lot of the old photographs and videos. So I think this hour-long piece that we're going to do is going to be wonderful to have for the future, and it's been really fun to put together as well. In terms of an actual party, it's not actually till November 2026, so we've got plenty of time to plan that. But the documentary and the filmmaking part is next week. So
I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's going to be
So
good.
Heather, we always finish the podcast the same way and ask you what your guiding principle in business is. So what would you say?
I think it is around customer service. I think it has been since the very beginning, and it still is today. And that's something that we talk about all the time in the office, putting the customer first, making sure that everything we do has them in mind. And whether that's the customer who's booking the car, making sure they've got peace of mind that everything's going to work, or the person who's actually in the car when the chauffeur's delivering the service.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you very much.